Bullard is SFG20's Product and Professional Services Director. We met up with Paul to learn more about how SFG20 is changing to become a digital solution to assist the building maintenance and facilities management industry in achieving compliance with ease. Who and what is SFG20?
Okay, so SFG20 is the industry standard for maintenance, so of a facility. So if you look at the activities that need to be carried out, going back to 1990 when SFG20 was first created, there were no standards, there was inconsistency as to how facilities were maintained, legislation was in place, but was that being carried out? How easy was that legislation to find? SFG20 brought a means of bringing all that information together and allowing companies to understand how they needed to maintain their facilities in order to meet that legislation, whilst also getting best value out of the assets that were within the facility.
What is an industry standard exactly, and why do we need one?
It was all about understanding what are the challenges for industry in the context of maintenance and our product SFG20. And what we found was people, first of all, are looking at the golden thread and actually hearing a lot about it, but not really knowing and understanding what they need to do to actually meet that requirement. I think that's a common thing in industry today, of people being fearful of the unknown. Where there hasn't been things put in place to say this is what you need to be doing, they're looking to bodies like SFG20 to actually shine that light and guide the way for them. And where we're talking about golden thread, part of that is actually evidencing the good work that's actually been done. So if you look at maintenance as a whole, there's lots of really good facilities management companies out there doing great work for the industry, but are they actually really showing the value that they're providing and able to evidence the compliance that they're meeting and keeping their people and buildings safe?
Can you talk a little bit about your new software?
SFG20 recognised that as we're named in government contracts and many other forms of documentation as to how buildings should be maintained, we need to assist the industry as much as we can in modernising how that content's consumed and utilised. So the first thing we do is look at how that content's presented and made accessible to users and the industry. Then we're looking at how easy it is for the system to use that, for people to use that content within the system. Are they able to easily search? Are they able to actually get to the things they need as quickly and easy as possible? And that's not being hindered by the functionality of the software or the licensing model presented by SFG20. The first thing we talk about is actually our content, and we have a whole team of people constantly reviewing legislation, looking at industry best practice, monitoring the British standards, and actually saying how can we improve the standard of maintenance that we're recommending people carry out. Now, of course, we know that people need to carry out their legislative duties, and if something meets compliance by carrying out a task, and that's law, that's what has to happen. But we also need to consider things like business criticality of an asset. Now, for example, a school, having a boiler down in winter is very serious because we might have to close that school. But for a different type of facility, that might not be the case. So we need to look at, on an individual site basis, how can we change our operational criticality alongside our legal and legislative obligations. We've also got the principle of how SFG20 can be accessed by people. If I am presenting a tender, how can I push that tender out to my subcontractors? How can I push it out to my engineers? I need them to do work for me. I need to make that accessible and actually them to be able to work with this content as easily as possible. We've also got the ability within the system to actually take in updates. Our technical authors who produce all of the content are constantly reviewing this legislation and the changes in the British standards, and also the improvements from manufacturers and how individual assets should be maintained, and all of that's fed in on at the moment, a monthly basis into updates of this content. But we know, unfortunately, that a lot of those updates are either skipped or ignored because it's very difficult for organisations to take that content into their CAFM or their third-party facilities management software systems. So we're going to change how they approach that and make it very easy for them to understand.
What are some of the challenges that this new software will overcome?
We've got the opportunity now within the new product to create some site-specific instructions for a particular schedule. So maybe it's this is very crudely, a boiler maintenance. If we're looking at boiler maintenance, but this boiler happens to be in a specific environment, or perhaps it even so it's under a specific temperature or perhaps access requirements, we might need to add some extra steps for the engineers into that particular schedule that they're presented with on their mobile devices. So the SFG20 Facilities IQ product allows for that content to be added in, but we're not moving you away from the standard SFG20 information. So we have the existing SFG20 content and the customer specific tasks and instructions without moving away from the standard. As updates come into that standard, they'll flow through into the system, and the customer specific content will remain constant. So where we're actually moving the industry forward is we can now have that ability to bespoke a site without losing the important legislation and standard that people rely on from SFG20.